He was the last person I expected to see like that. And what he was doing, my heart stopped. But what happened next, his trembling words, his tears, and that one truth he never meant for me to hear, changed everything. From which cities are you watching us tonight? Let me know in the comments, because what I'm about to share might get closer to home than you think. Now here's how it all began. It started on one of those slow late spring evenings where the sun lingers just a little too long over the neighborhood rooftops. I had just put the kettle on and was humming that old Sam Cooke tune Daniel used to tease me about when I realized I hadn't seen him all day. That wasn't unusual. He kept to himself more these days, but a mother knows when something's off. There was a heaviness in the house, something quiet but present, like a whisper you can't quite make out. Daniel had been back home for 6 months. After his divorce, he needed space, time to figure things out, as he called it, and I was happy to offer that. That's what mothers do. Especially when the world outside has taken a piece of your child and left them a little more lost than before. He wasn't the same boy who used to dance in the living room in his Batman pajamas. He barely laughed. His eyes were always searching but never really meeting mine. That evening I noticed the door to the guest room was ajar. Just a crack, enough to let a stripe of light leak into the hallway. I wouldn't normally go in without knocking, but something, maybe instinct, maybe habit, pulled me there. I had a folded blanket in my arms, an excuse if I needed one. But what I saw through that thin opening stopped me cold. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, facing away. His shirt was clutched in one hand, pressed against his face. His shoulders were shaking. It wasn't just crying. It was the kind of grief that comes from deep inside, the kind you can't control even if you tried. And in front of him, spread across the bed, were photos, dozens of them. Some of him and his ex-wife, some of us when he was little. But there were others of him alone, of him looking vulnerable. I noticed scribbled notes too. Pages torn from a journal, maybe. I didn't know what it meant at first, but the one photo that caught my eye because it was in a frame was of me and him, taken when he graduated high school. We were both younger then, brighter. I backed away quietly, hoping he hadn't heard me. My heart was pounding, not because I'd seen something wrong, but because I'd seen something true. I had seen pain, raw, unfiltered, and silent, the kind no one talks about. Later that night, I was in the kitchen again, pretending to read a book I'd already finished last week. I thought maybe he'd come down, maybe say something, but he didn't. And I couldn't sleep. The image of him like that, it stayed with me. So the next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I made him pancakes just like I used to when he was a kid. Blueberries, extra syrup, and that tiny dusting of powdered sugar. I set the plate down at the table and called up the stairs. "Daniel, breakfast." There was a long pause, then the sound of footsteps, slow, reluctant ones. When he walked into the kitchen, he looked like a man who hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his hair tousled. But he smiled, a small, tired smile. "You didn't have to do that, Mom." "I know," I said, sitting across from him. "But I wanted to." He sat down, pushing the syrup bottle with his fingertip like he was stalling. Then almost in a whisper he said, "You saw, didn't you?" I didn't answer at first. I just looked at him and he nodded. "Last night. I heard the floor creak. I thought it was my imagination, but I'm sorry," I finally said. "I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't know what I was seeing." His eyes filled again and his lips trembled. "It's okay. I wasn't really trying to hide. Not anymore." I wanted to reach for his hand, but I waited. I let him talk. "It's not just about the divorce," he said, voice cracking. "It's about everything I've been trying not to feel. Stuff I've buried for years. Regrets, choices, things I never said to Dad before he passed. Things I should have told you too. I've spent my whole life trying to be someone I thought I should be. And now I don't even know who I am." My chest ached. That kind of ache you get when you know your child has been carrying too much for too long. "I always felt like I had to protect you from me," he continued. "Even when I was a kid, you had enough to deal with after Dad left the first time and then when he came back sick. I didn't want to add more. You were never a burden, Daniel," I whispered. "You're my son. You're my heart walking around outside of me. Always have been." That was when he broke. His shoulders collapsed and the tears came hard. He didn't hide them. Didn't look away. And I let him cry. I got up, walked around the table and wrapped my arms around his back. He leaned into me like he used to when he was small, like he didn't have to pretend anymore. We stood there like that for a long time in the quiet of a sunlit kitchen, wrapped in a moment that had taken years to arrive. And in that silence I realized something. Sometimes the unthinkable isn't what you see. It's what someone carries for so long they forget what it feels like to let go. Daniel didn't say much the rest of that day. And honestly, I didn't press him to. There are some silences that aren't meant to be filled with words. Some wounds don't need explanations. They just need space. Still, the kitchen felt warmer after that moment we shared. Not because of the sun filtering through the curtains, but because for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were actually living in the same house, not just existing under the same roof. The next morning I found him in the backyard sitting on that old wooden bench his father had built years ago. It was still sturdy even after all the seasons had worn its polish down. Daniel had a cup of coffee in one hand, the other hand resting on his knee, fingers drumming softly. He looked older than his 35 years, not in a physical way, but like he'd seen too much and said too little for too long. I slid the screen door open and stepped outside, wrapping my shawl around my shoulders. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. Even though I didn't need an invitation, he gave me a half smile. "Always." We sat in silence for a few moments, the kind that didn't feel heavy this time. The birds were chirping faintly, and the morning breeze carried the scent of cut grass. That scent always reminded me of summers when he was small, when he'd play outside until the sky turned orange. "I used to sit out here with Dad," he said suddenly, mostly after his chemo. "When he was too tired to talk, we just sit." I nodded. "He always said you were his piece." Daniel scoffed gently. "He never told me that." "He should have," I said, reaching over to touch his wrist. "But you know it now." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine again. "You've always been the strong one. I think that's part of why I kept everything inside. You didn't break even when things were falling apart. I didn't want to be the one to crack first." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Daniel, I broke 1,000 times. You just didn't see it." That stunned him. After your father passed, there were nights I'd sit in that kitchen with a glass of wine and sob until I couldn't breathe. I'd cry into the laundry for God's sake. But I had to keep moving for you, for me. Pretending became survival. He looked away, swallowing hard. "I guess we were both pretending." I nodded. "We were." Another long silence passed, but it was comforting this time, like putting on an old sweater that still fits just right. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Last night after you hugged me, I couldn't sleep. I went through some of those old notes. Stuff I wrote but never meant to show anyone. It helped. Not just because I let it out, but because I saw you differently." I raised an eyebrow. "Differently how?" "You weren't just my mom in those memories. You were human. A woman. A woman who sacrificed, who carried so much but smiled. Anyway, I guess I never allowed myself to see you that way. And I think that's why I held so much guilt inside." That struck a nerve. There's something deeply intimate about being seen not just as a parent or a role, but as a whole person, flaws and all. And to hear it from your own child, well, it's a different kind of recognition, one that brings you back to yourself. "I think part of me wanted to punish myself," he continued, "for failing my marriage, for not saving Dad, for not being the son I thought I should be." "Daniel," I said gently, "the only person punishing you is you." He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. "I know." We sat for a long time after that, watching the wind play with the garden leaves. The shadows danced across our feet, and I realized it was the first time in years we'd truly been present with one another. Later that evening after dinner, I noticed him lingering in the hallway. He kept glancing toward my bedroom. At first I thought he needed something, but when I looked up from my book, he just stood there. "Do you need to talk?" I asked. He shifted his weight. "I wanted to show you something if that's okay." "Of course." He led me to the guest room. The bed was made and the photos were gone. Instead, on the desk there was a single notebook. He picked it up and held it out to me. "What's this?" I asked. "It's the real stuff," he said. "Not the things I told my therapist. Not the surface-level junk. Just raw thoughts. I wrote it during the divorce after Dad died, and recently too. I was going to burn it, but I want you to read it." I hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I want you to know who I really am." I took the notebook carefully, holding it like it might break. "Thank you." And then for a second he stepped forward, almost like he was going to hug me again. But instead he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Reading it might make you angry or sad or both. But I need you to see all of me, not just the sun. The man too. That night I lay in bed with the notebook on my lap, the lamp casting a soft glow on the pages. And as I read the first entry, written in handwriting that had once been so familiar, but now carried a weight I hadn't seen before, I felt something shift in me. This wasn't just Daniel's story. It was ours. I read deep into the night. Each page of Daniel's notebook opened a door I didn't know existed. His handwriting changed across the entries, some rushed, others neat and calculated, like he had tried to restrain himself before finally surrendering to the honesty pouring out of him. There were dates, places, raw emotions, regret, anger, longing. But most of all, there was pain, quiet pain that had been tucked away for so many years, even from himself. Some entries spoke of his childhood and the guilt he'd carried even then. Moments I thought were innocent, long forgotten, like the time he broke in a vase and blamed it on the wind. He still remembered them, exaggerated in his mind like proof he could never do anything right. There were heartbreaking pieces about his marriage too. How he had started feeling like a stranger in his own home. How he had stayed too long for the sake of appearances. How he had buried his needs for someone who had already emotionally left. But what pierced me the most were the sections about me. I used to think she never cried, that she was made of something different than the rest of us. And maybe that's why I never felt like I could break down in front of her. Because if she didn't break, what right did I have to fall apart? I paused there, my chest tightening, tears gathering under my eyes. I'd spent my whole life trying to be strong for him, never realizing that my strength may have made him feel like he couldn't show weakness, that he had to hide parts of himself because I seemed like I had it all under control. But I hadn't. I had just gotten good at surviving. The last entry was dated only a week ago. That one was different. It wasn't written like a journal. It was a letter addressed to me. Mom, if you're reading this, I guess I finally found the courage to let you in. I don't know why it's so hard to say these things aloud, but I need you to know how much I admire you, even if I spent years not saying it. I felt like a failure in more ways than I can count, and sometimes I wondered if you were disappointed in me. I saw the way you looked at me, sometimes like you were waiting for me to find my footing again, and I hated that I couldn't give you the son you remembered. But what I want you to know is this. Every time I felt like I had nothing left, I thought about you. How you kept going no matter what. That gave me something to hold on to. I'm still figuring it out. Mom, who I am, who I want to be. But I'm not going to run from it anymore. And I hope when I finally do stand on my own again, I'll be someone you're proud of. Love, Daniel. I closed the notebook gently, wiping the tears from my face. It felt like I just sat through years of unspoken conversations. And I wasn't sad. Not in the way I expected. I was overwhelmed and humbled. Daniel didn't come down for breakfast the next morning. I didn't expect him to. I knew he was giving me space. Instead, I left him a note on the counter. I read every word. I see you. I hear you. And I've never been prouder. That afternoon, I found him in the garage fiddling with some old paint cans. When I opened the door, he looked up cautiously. I walked over, took his hand and squeezed it. He didn't need to ask. He just nodded, and I saw the relief wash over him. Do you want to go for a drive? I asked. It's a nice day. He smiled faintly, like old times. Exactly like old times. We drove with the windows down, the wind brushing our faces. I didn't realize how long it had been since we'd done something so simple, so effortless. There was no need to fill every moment with conversation. The silence was no longer awkward. It was comforting. At one point, Daniel turned to me and asked, "Do you think it's too late to start over?" I kept my eyes on the road but reached across and touched his arm. It's never too late. Life isn't a straight line. It's a whole mess of loops and turns. And sometimes the best parts happen after everything falls apart. He looked out the window for a while, then said softly, "I think I want to go back to school." I blinked, surprised. Really? He nodded. Not for anyone else, not to impress anyone, just for me. I've been so lost trying to be what other people wanted, I never stopped to ask what I wanted. And I think I want to learn again about life, about myself, about people. I smiled. That sounds like the best kind of reason. When we returned home, there was a different air between us. A closeness that hadn't been there in years, not because of some grand event, but because we had finally taken down the walls. That night, over a simple dinner of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes, we laughed. Really laughed, the kind that starts in your stomach and makes your cheeks hurt. And when Daniel said goodnight, he paused at the top of the stairs and looked down at me. Thanks, Mom, for everything. You don't have to thank me, I said. Just keep going. I will, he said. Promise. I believed him. The days that followed were quiet, but in the best way. The house no longer felt like it was carrying the weight of all the words we hadn't said. Daniel spent more time downstairs, even helped me reorganize the pantry one afternoon. Something I never thought I'd see him do. He didn't talk much about the past anymore. He didn't have to. It was like we had finally acknowledged the elephant in the room, nodded at it, and gently led it to the door. One morning I walked into the living room to find him sitting at the dining table, laptop open, eyes focused. He was typing. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood in the doorway watching. Applying for programs, he said without looking up. Just community college for now. Psychology maybe. Or social work. Those sound like good fits, I said, walking over and placing a fresh cup of coffee beside him. He smiled. I think I want to help people the way I should have helped myself a long time ago. There was a quiet pride bubbling inside me. Not loud, not showy. Just the steady warmth of knowing your child is finding his way again on his own terms. Later that week, I got a call from my sister inviting me to come stay for a few days at her lake house. Normally, I would have hesitated, worried Daniel might spiral again if I left. But I didn't feel that way this time. He was different now, more grounded. When I told him about the invitation, he nodded. You should go. You need a break too. I hesitated. You sure you'll be okay? I will, he said confidently. Besides, I've got some reading to catch up on, and maybe I'll even cook. I laughed. As long as you don't burn the kitchen down. Fair enough, he grinned. When I got to the lake house 2 days later, it took less than 12 hours for me to start missing home. Not out of worry, but out of something else. Something that surprised me. I missed him. Not just as my son, but as this man he was becoming. Someone I hadn't known in a long time, maybe ever. Someone real. Someone trying. That night, sitting by the water with a glass of wine and a blanket over my shoulders, I looked up at the stars and let myself feel all of it. The relief, the grief, the hope. It was strange letting go of the version of Daniel I'd carried for so long, the quiet boy, the fragile man. That version had needed me to hold everything together. But this new version, he was beginning to hold himself. When I got back home, the house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Daniel had cooked a whole roast chicken, roasted vegetables, and bless him, something resembling a salad. I may have called Google for help, he said sheepishly, pulling out a chair for me. The meal wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. We ate, we talked, and when the dishes were finally done, we found ourselves sitting on the couch, the TV on low in the background. I have a question, he said suddenly. Okay, what was the hardest thing you've ever forgiven me for? That stopped me for a second. I thought back not to one event, but to a feeling, the helplessness of watching someone you love disappear into themselves. The helplessness of not knowing how to help. Honestly, I said it wasn't one moment. It was all the small ones. All the nights I watched you retreat, thinking you didn't need anyone. I forgave those even when they hurt because I knew you were hurting too. He nodded slowly, his eyes moist. I'm sorry for all of that. I know I whispered. And I forgive you again and again if I have to. That's what love is. He leaned back against the couch, exhaling deeply. I think I'm finally starting to understand that. The next morning I found a new note on my pillow. A small one, just a few words scribbled in his messy handwriting. Thank you for catching me when I didn't know I was falling. I folded it gently and placed it in the top drawer of my nightstand beside a photo of him as a baby. That note, simple as it was, felt like a ribbon tying everything together. Not a perfect ending, but a new beginning.